Cool. Who am I, in case anyone's wondering? I'm Brittany. I'm the Director of Strategic Development at WIA. I handle kind of external communications and partnerships and seeking out incredible speakers, such as Kate today. But I think you're all probably more interested in who Kate is. So it's my pleasure to introduce Kate. She's the founder of Grow Up, which is a certified B Corp, an award-winning vertical farming business in the UK that's powered entirely by renewable energy. That's a fact that I learned recently, which was exciting to hear, Kate. She recently won the Sustainability Entrepreneur and Equity-Backed Entrepreneur Awards at the 2023 Great British Entrepreneur Awards. Fabulous. Congratulations, Kate. Grow Up was the first vertical farm to introduce branded salad into supermarkets in the UK. They've raised over 100 million pounds to fulfill their mission of bringing affordable food, building a resilient and sustainable food system to fruition. So we are so thrilled to welcome Kate here today. Maybe some little claps or snaps for those of you that have your video on to show some love in this space. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's really a really lovely community to have the chance to speak to.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So Kate, to start, I think it would be great to share a little bit of kind of maybe the short abridged version of your story prior to Grow Up. Kind of give us a brief window into how you maybe arrived at that turning point in your life first.
Sure. I'll do my best, and you can do that hurry up signal if you need me to go faster at any point. So I co-founded what was then called Grow Up Urban Farms almost exactly 11 years ago. We just celebrated the 11th birthday of, when you get the certificate from registering your business and it has a date on it. So we use that as the official date of the business founding. And so we just celebrated 11 years. And I set the business up with my co-founder, Tom, because we were passionate about sustainable food production. And I don't come from a food and farming background. I grew up in London, so pretty urban. I'm not going to say I'd never been to a farm before I started this business, but what I would say is that definitely my passion for food was more on the cooking and eating end than on the growing and producing end. But I have always been passionate about food, and I'd really had a sort of long developed interest in sustainability. And I say that sort of laughingly now, because I think actually when I was really interested in it, sustainability, it wasn't actually a thing. If I think back sort of 15, 16 years ago. So after when I finished school, I went to university and did my first degree in English and education. And I think I thought I wanted to be a teacher, but when I finished my degree, I realized I didn't feel like I knew enough to go and teach anybody anything. So instead of doing teacher training, I went and joined a graduate scheme at IBM, which seemed like a great opportunity at the time, and really was a great opportunity to get a really good sort of corporate business grounding. And when I was at IBM, I spent 6 years there working on really big technology transformation projects. And I would work on this sort of project transformation, stakeholder engagement, communication side of things. So all the things that you need to do to make a project successful that aren't the actual bit of technology that you're implementing. And I loved what I was doing there, but I really felt like the purpose of all of it was just to make more money for big companies. And that wasn't very soul-fulfilling, it turned out. And so I didn't really know what to do, but I took a sabbatical and I went to go and do a master's at Imperial College in London in environmental sustainability and business. I get environmental technology, sorry, and business. And I guess I thought, well, maybe I'll go into consulting, doing that kind of consulting instead of technology consulting. But I really didn't know what I was going to do with that. And it was whilst I was on that master's program that I came across the whole idea of what 13 years ago people were calling urban farming, the idea of growing food in a way that's totally disconnected from land as the main resource that you need. And I just thought this was amazing, that you could take these new and emerging technologies and you could use them to grow food in a way that totally disrupted and transformed the food system, or had the potential to do it, And the thing I found really interesting was that 13 years ago, no one had any idea what the business model for that looked like. Like, how do you disrupt a supply chain that has existed forever with something that is totally different? No one had any idea. And so I got really interested in that on my master's. I finished that. I went back to IBM and I lasted for about 6 months before I realized I couldn't really stay there and do that anymore. And in the world's worst case of accidental entrepreneurism, there was nobody doing urban farming or vertical farming in the UK at that time. There was just no one else doing it. I'd met some guys in America who were doing it, some guys in Switzerland. And so I met my co-founder and we set the business up because there wasn't anyone else to go and work for, which I don't think that's not necessarily a sort of general entrepreneurship story of, I always wanted to be my own boss or I always wanted to work for myself. But I suspect it's not unheard of that other people set businesses up like that because there was a need and I had this huge passion and I had to create that and create that vehicle to make it happen.
Amazing. I'm curious with, making the leap from something that is kind of traditionally like a stable role at a large corporation like IBM, like what gave you the courage, I guess, or how would you, what was the thing that you needed at the time to really make that leap? You say it is like, oh, I only lasted 6 months and then I was ready to go. I'm sure it was probably more difficult than that to arrive at that decision. Or maybe it wasn't, but tell us a little bit about that journey for yourself.
It's a really good question. And I think on the one hand, at the time, I think what I told myself was, well, I've got enough savings that I'll go and do this for a year. I'll just support myself for a year and I'll do it for a year. And sort of what's the worst that can happen? Like I can go back to IBM. They're not going to say, no, sorry, like this career doesn't exist anymore. Like I thought, okay, you could do this for a year and go back. It seemed relatively low risk. And at the time I didn't have a mortgage. I didn't have any children. It sort of felt like, I could just make the decision to do it myself. I think actually, if I look back on the last 11 years and behind that, one of the reasons why I was able to make that decision, whether or not it was a 1-year risk or a 2-year, 5-year, 11-year risk, was because I was incredibly fortunate to be in a very supportive relationship with someone who I'm still in a relationship with, who was sort of willing to emotionally and to begin with financially support me. And I think it's really important. I'm very pleased to get the chance to acknowledge that and acknowledge the role that he's played in that. I don't often get the chance to do that, so it's nice to be able to tell you all.
That's wonderful. I think it seems, especially in the world of, or like the heropreneurship world, it's not often that the community is acknowledged. So it's a beautiful thing for you to bring up.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so you reached a point after grad school where you knew like there was sort of no turning back. You had to give this a shot to build this more resilient food system. Tell us like I don't want to ask you like the story of how it all evolved because that takes forever, but I'm curious about like kind of like a high and a low. Like, through this journey, entrepreneurship can be very volatile. It can be very up and down. I'm curious if there's a moment where it got really low and what you learned from that, and then vice versa, where it felt really high and what you learned from that.
It's a really good question, and that you're totally right. That is part of the journey. It's part of the sort of distinct experience of trying to create something yourself and own it and do it yourself versus working for someone else. There's just so much unpredictability. And so I think if I was to look back, over the last 11 years, there have obviously been lots of ups and downs. With only the sort of naive hope and enthusiasm of an impact entrepreneur. So I hope this will be really relevant to this group. With only that, only someone who has that naive hope and enthusiasm would take on the challenge of creating a business where the technology is new, business model doesn't exist yet. No one's proven the route to market. Like, I don't know what we were thinking. It was completely nuts that we thought this was a good idea for our first business, Tom and I, to do this. So sort of, I suppose, if I, one of the highs was just that being sort of that, having that early initial feeling of momentum and enthusiasm of being so enthusiastic. I met my business partner. We were introduced by a mutual acquaintance. So we weren't friends before we started working together. And sorry, my business partner is not my life partner, different people. And so one of the joys for me has been like developing that friendship with him over the last 11 years as we've worked together. The sort of real high for me, and this, I guess this says something about how challenging it's been to scale the business, but the real high for me came last year when we launched into the UK's largest retailer, Tesco, because we'd always, for me, I mean, it was just such an amazing thing, having set off with this ambition of making sustainable food affordable. We had no idea when we started how we were going to achieve that, or sort of really what that looked like. But if you think about it, like, what says affordable food more than being on the shelf in the the biggest supermarket in the UK? They buy 20, they procure, so not the shoppers, but they as a supermarket buy 25% of the fresh produce that's sold in the UK. Like, it's just, what an amazing thing to have got on the shelf there. So that was massive high. But along the way, I guess there have been times that were both professionally, sometimes at the same time, both professionally very challenging for me and personally very challenging for me. And so if I were to pick two of those in, not in the order that they happened, in 2014, we built the UK's first indoor farm, and it was really, really cool, but it was a prototype. No one had ever built anything like that before, and we learned a lot about what worked and what didn't work. And in 2017, we had to make the incredibly difficult decision to close that facility down. And that meant letting go 15 people that we'd hired, and had, a lot of them we'd worked with an employment charity in the local area. So these were young people with no previous work or experience or high educational attainment, and they definitely didn't have any training or studying in vertical farming before they came to work with us. And so sitting them all down in a meeting room and explaining to them that they weren't going to have jobs in 2 months' time was not fun. And I do not want to ever have to do that again. And I have sort of so much sympathy for any entrepreneur who sort of and it's not uncommon, again, that things happen in business, but honestly for me that was incredibly difficult. Personally, some other challenges. So my son is 7.5 now, but if you do the maths, you will see that my business has been around for a bit longer. And so I kind of never felt like there was a good time to have a baby, because sort of, when is there a good time when you're running your own business? And guess what? It turns out I was right. There isn't ever a good time to have a baby when you're running your own business. And that was really it was pretty hard. And I didn't really have any role models at the time. I didn't really feel like I had any other women to talk to who were entrepreneurs and were having a baby, and were like still at that early stage where the business sort of needed your full attention. So actually, weirdly, interestingly, when I tell this story in the UK, I wonder if I will get a different response with an American audience. But when I explain in the UK that I didn't really take any maternity leave, that's a massive big deal. But I know that it's a different situation in the States, and so maybe for women in the States, it's more common that you would have a baby and not take any maternity leave. But I didn't really take any time off, and it really took me a lot of years to work out, and I still don't have it right, but sort of how to balance my time and my priorities and my sense of identity as a human being and an entrepreneur and a mum. And it's just really hard, isn't it? No no other way to describe it. It's just really hard. So yeah, like being really open and honest. I got to a point last year where I woke up. There was various things going on, but I woke up one day in the third quarter of last year, and I sat up in bed and I thought, I don't know how to do my life actually today. And I had just reached this absolute point of burnout where I didn't know how the day before I'd managed to do all the things that I needed to do to sort of be me and get through the day. Which was quite a sort of wake up call to get to that, to have allowed myself to get to that point. So I made some sort of quick, I suppose, short-term decisions about sort of how I was going to better balance my work life. And I'm doing a better job of that now. But the reality is that one of the ways that I've done that is I've gone down to 3 days a week at Grow Up, and I'm happy to sort of take more questions on it. But like that means I haven't won yet, because having a work-life balance where you only work 3 days a week for me is not a balance. So I guess I'm still working on that. Sorry, Brittany, there was quite a lot of highs and lows and personal stuff in there. But
it was a big question, and I'm so appreciative of how you just opened up about all of that. I think it's such a common experience for many of us in our own various flavors and cultural contexts and situations. Yeah. There's something in what you just shared that I think probably resonates with everyone on this call. So it's just very honest and real to bring those things up.
I think part of the thing that helps people is just, and you know, women in particular, but you know, parents, is just realizing that you're not the only person who's experiencing the things that you're experiencing. You know, that's
yeah. What a beautiful thing to find those people by sharing about, like, how else do we find those people without talking about it?
Exactly.
Thank you. So then across all of that, those ups and downs, that volatility, like being really in it and then kind of coming out of it, like what have you learned over the various ups and downs? Is there like a big picture reflection? Is there any wisdom that you return to when you can find, you know, those moments of groundedness?
I think so. If I understand correctly, sort of for most of the WIA community, you know, we are all working on businesses or projects or ideas that we're passionate about having an impact on, and you know, there's more to what we're all doing than just bringing in a paycheck. And I think one of the things I've really realized is that in many ways, that is a new type of job. To have that real integration between purpose, like professional purpose and personal purpose. And it brings with it actually some additional challenges as well as huge opportunities. And I mean huge opportunities personally for people, but also huge obvious opportunities for changing the world and solving big complex problems. But I think one of the things that I've learned is that in the situation where you are trying to solve a social or environmental problem through a business, the things that make a business great, which is basically around leadership and culture and ways of working, those things become even more important to the success of your business. There might be a tendency, especially early on when things are really difficult, to think that stuff doesn't matter. The most important thing is proving that this business works and proving that we can have an impact and make money. And those things are super important, and you do have to do those things. But it's definitely at your peril if you avoid leaning into the sort of massive added value that really fantastic leadership can bring to your business.
That's super wise. And I think also with a mission-driven organization or business, I think many leaders also rely on the mission. Like, well, the mission is enough. We all care about that.
Yeah.
When, you know, there are just, you know, leadership essentials and ways of working and the basics that, are so foundational. Super important point. Going back to Grow Up for a second, because I wonder if there are people who are curious about the work that you've done. I'm curious to hear just a little bit about, the products that you have and kind of what you have achieved, and then maybe a little bit about, where the business is going. And
sure.
what you want people to know about it.
Sure. So as you mentioned at the beginning, Grow Up is a B Corp certified vertical farm. And you may or may not have come across vertical farming before. Can people put their hands up on Zoom? Do you want to give me a show of hands if you've come across vertical farming? I mean, thank you, Whitney. You can physically put your hand up, but I meant whether people can do it on the buttons. But that's great. People can do both.
Either way is good, right? We have a few hands.
Cool. So like, yeah, a couple of people. Cool. That's about normal. It's always weird to me that this thing that I have devoted every waking moment of the last 11 years of my life to, that plenty of people don't know about it. But vertical farming is a really all-encompassing term for the idea of growing food or plants in a controlled environment. And what we do at Grow Up is we do that controlled environment agriculture, but at a scale that makes it comparable to the conventional supply chain. At the moment, the supply chain that we work in, we produce ready-to-eat bagged salads. So mixes of baby leaves that are ready to eat. And we do all of that from our farm in East Kent. It's called Pepperness. And we grow in a very controlled way so that our product is ready to eat without being washed. And because of the fact that it's not been washed, it's not had to be handled, it's grown all year round in the UK, and it's grown in very controlled conditions, it stays fresh for a much longer time than conventionally produced salads. And that is great because if you ask anybody who buys bagged salads, certainly in the UK, they'll tell you that they buy it because it's healthy and it's convenient, but they hate the fact that it never stays fresh for long enough. So we've focused, and you can grow lots of different things in a vertical farm, and I'll explain the technology in a bit, but we really focused our products on what consumer problems are we solving, and therefore sort of what space does our product deserve on the shelf or in the category. If you haven't heard of a vertical farm before, or you have, you might sort of be able to picture lots of stacked layers with pink lights. That's what people usually think of, and that is how one part of our farm looks. We create the perfect growing conditions for our plants. So for our salads, that's like a Mediterranean spring day every day of the year, where they get the right lighting, the right nutrients, the right airflow, and all of that. We're controlling that environment so we can predict very closely when the crops will be ready to harvest and what volume, what yield we're going to get. The whole farm is very automated. So when you open a bag of our salad and you pick the leaves out, you're usually the first person who will have touched those leaves. There are people working on the farm. It's not 100% robots, but the people we employ about just over 100 people now in the business. The majority of them do work at Pepperness. So we have our agronomy team, the plant sciences, and then the operations and technical teams, really sort of caring for those plants and products as they make their way through. And then we're both the grower of the ingredients, but we're also the packer. We pack and brand the products. So we sell our Unbelievable salad brand into Tesco. We're about to launch that into another supermarket as well. Then we've got another value brand called the Fresh Leaf Co, which is on sale in a supermarket called Iceland, and another one called Spa. So we're really focusing at the moment on that baby leaf category. There's not a lot of brand in produce at all in the UK. I think it's a bit different in other places, but there's not a lot of brand at all in produce, and so we've got this real opportunity to sort of play in a category that's heavily underdeveloped. There's lots of opportunity there to build a brand and build value in the business, which is very exciting. At the same time as solving producing a much better quality product for shoppers and solving a real supply chain challenge for retailers, because particularly post-Brexit in the UK, the supply chains that we've relied on to feed people and to keep the shelves stacked are getting increasingly more volatile. And so both from a retail and non-retail channel, people are increasingly looking to see how we can bring more local food production back to the UK, so we don't have to rely on imports that are getting more and more tricky.
Yeah, fascinating. And congrats on being so successful in this new category already. What do you see as possible in the next few years with Grow Up? Like, if you are wildly successful, what's happening? What's different about either the supply chain or people's habits, or just what comes up?
So we've still got some more capacity to build at Peperness. So that farm will still take a couple more years to finish, and we can still supply from there, but there's more production to bring online to meet the demand that we're seeing. And after that, what we'll do is sort of take the things that work for our model and apply them in the next place. So I've talked about the product and the fact that we can grow salad that stays fresh for longer, and that's solving a problem. What I haven't talked about, although you mentioned it at the beginning, Brittany, is that we're able to do that at a competitive price on the shelf in the UK's largest retailer, because we have a unique business model where we built the farm next to a renewable power plant. And so we have a direct connection to that power plant where we buy electricity directly from them at a discounted price. But we also take the low-grade heat that's produced by that power plant, and we use that for the majority of our energy needs. So it's a much more efficient way of using energy, and lots of other vertical farming businesses have found recently that turns out energy is pretty important when it comes to the cost of food production. We were not expecting the war with Ukraine and the gas price crisis to test our business model quite so stringently over the last couple of years, but it has done and sort of proven our thesis that you have to think about energy and food infrastructure as being really closely intertwined. So we have this unique business model, an energy model, where we can bring down the cost of production. And then we've chosen to focus on a set of products that really play into a category opportunity. And so that's what we'll do next, is find another opportunity where we can apply that thinking and that business model to get on the shelf competitively. So it's likely to be more leaf, to be honest, for the next couple of years. There's lots of opportunity there for us, but you can grow pretty much anything in vertical farming. It just ultimately comes down to the price that you can get on the shelf for, and what you're competing against. So for me, a big win for us is demonstrating that the UK salad business works, taking that salad business to other parts of Europe where conditions are similar, but then also in the UK, developing our next non-salad business to do a different type of product where we can do that. And there are on one hand fingers a handful of other people doing what we're doing in the UK, but I really believe that this is the way that we will grow all leaf in the future, and in time other things as well. Not everything. We need the reason why our food and agricultural system is in such a mess at the moment is because we've reduced the number of crops we grow and the way that we produce. So we need more diversity, more different ways of growing, more different businesses, more different types of innovative and sustainable farming, not fewer. So I don't think everything is going to be grown in vertical farms going forwards, but I want to see sort of more of that production happen, not just from Grow Up, but from other businesses across the country.
Wonderful. Very exciting. I'm curious, kind of, you brought up a few things like robotics, and you have an agronomy team, and you now have expertise in energy that you probably never thought you would. Like, but rewind 11 years ago when you're starting this business, like, what was it like, or did feelings of imposter syndrome exist for you? Was there a sense of, I don't know everything that's needed to make this successful, but I'm going to do it anyway? Like, this community is often grapples with these sorts of questions, like imposter syndrome, confidence building, like really believing that we have all the skills and needs within, and remembering that about ourselves. What have you learned from this journey about any of those topics? What comes up?
Well, I guess the first thing that's helpful is maybe to try and separate out what you need as a success, what you need to do or be as a successful leader versus what a business needs to scale successfully. Because the reality is, like, that if you have ambitions to scale a business and to have more impact and make more money, in most cases, that's going to require more people. And the best thing you can do is hire people who are better than you and smarter than you. And so that's not imposter syndrome to want to hire people to help you scale the business who are experts in their field. And certainly I feel like I've made some great hires over the years of bringing in people who are definitely better at what they do than I could be. And that's not something to be ashamed of. That's something to be proud of. I think when it comes to sort of developing yourself as a leader, imposter syndrome is real. Like it is a real thing that we sort of can feel and can tell ourselves that we're not good enough, or we don't know how to do something, or we don't like. Definitely for me, there's like a not deserving things. That's like a part of it as well. You haven't worked hard enough for this, or like you don't deserve to be getting that thing. That maybe that's just me personally. I suspect not. I suspect that happens to other people. But there is also like an added layer, I think, on top of that, that sometimes as women in business, we don't get our strengths recognized early enough on because we feel like we have to compete or prove ourselves like in the sort of dominant sort of male business world. And certainly I think for me that's taken me sort of longer than I would have liked. There's no point in beating yourself up about things that have gone before, but like imagine what I could have done if I'd have sort of worked this out earlier, that actually finding your sort of your true sense of self and strength and power isn't about trying to be someone else's idea of a leader. And in a world where a lot of the role models that we will see as successful business leaders do not look or sound or behave like us, that can, and that is not just a thing for women. And I'm very conscious as I say that like as a, a white, Western, heterosexual, English speaking middle class woman, like I much more already see people in my image than, just because they're a different gender to me. That's an additional challenge you have to kind of get over when you don't necessarily have those role models of great leadership. Sort of, you have to find your own mode more, I think. But that's, I think, a really great way of overcoming imposter syndrome, actually, because the more you can develop that own sense of self, the harder it is for the other part of your brain or for anyone else to take that away from you.
Amazing. And probably a lifelong practice for all of us.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that. I think the final question I'll bring up for you, Kate, before we open it up to everybody else, because I think there may be a lot of
that's great
interest to dig in more. I kind of want to return to the story you shared about your relatively recent experience with burnout and kind of reckoning with the life that you need to redesign for yourself. First of all, I think it takes great courage to voice that. I think it takes a lot of courage to say something's not working, I need to do something different. So thank you for modeling that. And I guess within it, like, where are you currently? You're in it, which is kind of fascinating for us, right? Because it's not, you're not necessarily on the other side. You haven't learned all the lessons. So I'm wondering, like, with this, like, what topics are you spinning around? I imagine, one that comes to mind for me, if I were to guess, would be something like, what is sustainable well-being within an ambitious, career path? Like, what? That's one thing, but I'm making assumptions. Like, what are you kind of turning around in your head, if you're open to sharing with us? some of those
well, I feel like I should like declare both on your and my behalf, Brittany, that this wasn't a planted question when I say that the answer is I've recently started working with a coach. That wasn't planted, and that wasn't we didn't plan that. But certainly one of the, you know, like, I'm not being funny, but one of the massive things for me has been about, you know, working with a coach is partly about asking for help. And so that's been a big thing of sort of really thinking about that. For me, I've also had to work, I've been doing a lot of work on working out the difference and noticing when I'm doing something because it's what I want or what I need. I don't think I've been very good at paying attention to sort of what I want. I've sort of, you know, like relied on, you know, okay, what do I need? You know, what's the sort of bare minimum? And have put, you know, again, difficult as an impact entrepreneur and a parent, but, you know, I haven't often put myself first. And so sort of actually putting my own wants and needs first as a way of then thinking about sort of what can I plan in and what do I have the time for and what do I have the sort of resource for across all parts of my life. I think the other thing I've been working on is sort of, yeah, that it's a bit what I was talking about before. So being clear on my sense of sort of self and strength and power and trying to lean into that a bit more, especially at work. I think one of the interesting, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to, this feels like something I should have written down. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to say it right the first time, but so you'll bear with me. One of the interesting things about being an impact entrepreneur is you have this incredible sense of purpose that what you are doing could have a big impact. And it's quite difficult to compare that like as a mother. Like I only have one child, and so like on a really like sort of twisted basis, where am I going to have more impact in the world? Spend time with my kid? If I spend time changing the food system? Like that's not, and I've talked about this with other impact entrepreneur moms as well, so I know I'm not the only person who's felt this, but there's like, that's quite a sort of weird tension that you need to face into. Like it exists, right? It's not and I think it's particularly difficult because for lots of women, if like basically if you've been working in a career that's not particularly fulfilling for you and then you have a child, you're like, this is incredible, look at the purpose that this has brought to my life. And like that's an amazing thing for people. Like what a sort of brilliant way to approach parenting. If you've already found your purpose in life and you think that that's your business and what you're doing in business, really like there's some like interesting sort of tension there. And so I suppose one of the things that I'm trying to do now is not to sort of push any of that away and just try to be a bit more honest with myself. Okay, what's actually going on here? What am I feeling about this bit of my life, and what am I feeling about another bit of my life? And like, where can I have the most impact as a parent and a mum? You know, where can I have the most impact as a partner in my relationship, you know, as a human being, and sort of trying to actually like, yeah, play into all of those roles rather than pretending that there's no tension here, it's all just going to be fine. I'd say I'm trying to do that. And I think the one other thing, I think this is probably quite important, is that I made a decision at the beginning of this year when I sort of transitioned into my new role at work, that because I went down to 3 days a week, but I also basically hired someone to take over all of the commercial director role of the business that I was doing. So I don't have a day-to-day operational role in the business now like I did before. And I made the decision that I didn't want my entire emotional well-being to be tied up with my success at work. So I kind of got to that point. And so being really clear and setting that boundary for myself of like making sure that my emotional well-being and sense of self and success was going to come from more than one place. I've made sure I've been doing that as well. So that was a long answer, Brittany, to your question.
No, it's fast. It's so personally helpful for me to hear that. As you know, I have a young daughter and I'm similarly grappling with some of these questions. I think it's really honest to acknowledge that tension and to not, as women, feel shame for maybe trying to put things in a hierarchy of what matters more, or what it's just that it simply is. I think that's really interesting for us to have the confidence to voice, because again, if we're gendering it, which is never not necessarily the goal here, but I wonder how many of our male counterpart parents ask that same question, what that looks like. That would be an interesting conversation for us to have.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
Wow. Okay. So much I want to keep asking you, Kate, but I'm going to open the floor to everyone else here. If anyone has a question, you can feel free to come off of mute and just ask it, or put it in the chat, whatever you're more comfortable with. And we'll spend the rest of our time just in a back and forth combo.
Do you want me to take the questions, or do you want to take them, Brittany? Who's
I imagine they're more interested in what you have to say, Kate.
No,
So
I think, but do you want me to choose who? As in, like,
no, I think I'll manage that, Kate.
Yeah, okay, fine.
I'll manage that.
That's what I meant.
Whitney, I see, has raised her hand. Please, Whitney.
Thanks, Brittany. And thank you, Kate, for being so honest and vulnerable with us. It was really wonderful hearing your journey. I'd be curious, as a fellow impact entrepreneur that kind of, understands when you get into something with this like big idea, but don't quite know, like when you said, I got into, I wanted to make sustainable food affordable. It's a big goal. And like, what was your process of moving towards the like tangible of what does that look like? And how did you decide this is the thing I'm going to put my effort towards? Like I support a collective impact model on food security in Camden, and often we struggle with like, how do we know there's like 10 potential solutions to this? Yeah. So like, how do you choose the one or two things that you're really gonna, what was that process like for you?
There must have been, it's a great question. And again, sort of one that will be common, not just in food, but in any situation where you found a purpose of a problem that you want to solve and a thing you want to sort out, kind of thing. Feel like there must have been some kind of unconscious thing going on for me of like, choose the very difficult thing that no one else has tried to do yet, but I'm not sure, I don't think I'd recommend that. But looking back on it sometimes feels a bit like that. I think we did, again, sort of we did the really sort of good best practice startup activities. We did the business model canvas, to make sure that we really understood what the opportunity was and how we could create a business model from the thing that we wanted to address. And there is a social impact business canvas that you can use, which I think is very helpful rather than the traditional ones, or at least I remember that. And similarly, we worked on a couple of with a couple of business accelerators where we had to sort of really hone the story, but also the financial model, and really understand sort of what the business was going to do and what that was going to be structured like. And that was an iterative process. We have pivoted and changed slightly how we've done things, and I think that's quite common. So again, sort of for impact businesses, I think that process can be quicker to iterate, because you can really quickly discount business models or structures that are not going to deliver your impact. They might make money, but they're not going to deliver your impact, so that don't worry about them. So I think sort of going through that process of really sort of I've now forgotten, but I think there's a term for it's not like sort of rapid iteration of business models, and really testing them with potential customers and doing that so that you can sort of have that confidence. And then the other thing is, I don't know, this is like one of those things that's like a British saying that doesn't translate very well, but there's this saying, kill your darlings, which basically means be prepared to not hold anything sacred. Now that doesn't mean your purpose doesn't sort of, that's not what it's talking about. Your purpose is what you're going for, that's fine, but like how you think you're going to get there, don't hold anything sacred. You've got to be prepared to let anything go if it turns out it's not serving you or the purpose you're trying to achieve.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thanks for the question.
Anyone else? Don't be shy. Your question is welcome here.
Should say, by the way, I sort of kept seeing popping up that people have been putting comments. I haven't been able to look at them, but obviously I will read everything that everyone's written afterwards. Thank you.
We have a question from Ebony in the chat. How do you balance marketing for the farm versus working within it to scale?
Ebony, do you mean sort of supply and demand, as in how do we manage trying to sell what we've got versus how much we can produce? Have I understood that?
Forgive me, it's loud in the background.
No, it's
But,
fine.
Just to add clarity, I am an entrepreneur as well. And so it's always a balance of what am I doing? I'm always working in my business, but at what point, I'm working on like actually delivering the work and working on, with my wonderful partners. And but at what point the balance of, wait, I have to actually grow the brand itself. Like, how do you find that balance?
Right. Okay. See, I've been too stuck in selling salad. I thought you were talking about salad marketing, but that's a very good question. I think it's a question of discipline, because I think it will always be easier to tell yourself that you need to be in the detail and you need to be doing in the business doing things. And it's about having the discipline to give yourself the space and time, and like sometimes in permission to work on the other stuff. And so, it's particularly hard when you're maybe earlier stage and bringing on new customers or bringing on new revenue streams is not just important, it's like critical to the business surviving. So you've got to do those things, but you can always find time, even if it is 10 minutes or 50 minutes once a week, to sit down and give yourself that permission and that time to think about what you can be doing to grow the business. And I think especially when you're a small team, maybe you're a solo founder, maybe it feels like you're sort of resource constrained. It can be really helpful to have, so it's just you. I would say really helpful to find a mentor or someone external who you can ask them basically to help keep you accountable for the time that you're spending on thinking about growing the business, if that makes sense. They don't have to do the work. They just have to agree that, like, once a month or whatever, you're gonna have a meeting with them so you can present to them sort of what you've been working on and what you've been thinking on. I think having someone to keep you accountable is really, really valuable, because it's really hard to do by yourself. So well done, whatever you're doing now, well done already.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Athena, you raised your hand, and then we have one more question in the chat, and that's probably where we'll pause today. So Athena, over to you.
Yeah, I want to build on what you were just saying to Ebony and what you were talking about earlier about asking for help. Because from my point of view, asking for help is a superpower and absolutely necessary, and most of us are very bad at it. So I'd love for you to give a piece of advice around asking for help for women who are earlier, maybe in their social entrepreneur journey.
I'm laughing because that's it. Thank you, Athena. I will give the advice. I'll tell you a story which Brittany was actually there for. So I don't know if she's going to remember this, but I was part of an accelerator program when I was 7.5 months pregnant with my son, and it was this incredible. We did this incredible 2-week residential program. It was really transformational. And early on in the program, we did an exercise which it turned out was about asking for help. And basically, I don't even remember what the exercise is called, but you're blindfolded and you're in a room and there's a circle of people around you, that, and you have to get out the circle. And basically, so the last person to get out the circle loses. And it basically ended up as me and like one other guy. And apparently it's usually the men who are left in the circle. But basically, bear in mind, this was me like 7.5 months pregnant, starting to get quite uncomfortable for standing up blindfolded. And you couldn't talk either, I don't think. Yeah, you couldn't talk. But basically I was so unable at that point to ask for help that I didn't realize that the way you won the game was just by putting your hand up to ask for help. Like, that's how you got out the circle. There was no trick. There was nothing. Anyway,
I know that I have led that same game.
I always think about that. Like, I needed so much help in that situation. Like, for so many different reasons. Why was I asking for help? I think a really great tip for anybody, it doesn't matter what stage you're at in your career, is like, sort of start from the starting point, like having your mindset that other people, for the most part, most people love being asked for help. They love being asked for their advice. They love feeling like they can contribute, especially if you're an impact entrepreneur. People love being able to contribute to what you're doing. So start from the mindset, not of, oh God, this is, I don't feel like I should have to ask for this, but just switch it around. Think like almost like I'm giving something here by asking someone for help. It really changes the dynamic of the conversation. And sort of, it also means that you come from it, especially as a woman, from like a position of strength, not a position of uncomfortableness or weakness. And that can work in any situation. I find that really interestingly, that works with my son. It works with my 7-year-old son, like that actually, if I can change the dynamic of the conversation, if I want him to do something, like to really ask him for his help with something. And it's a fantastic way of getting the help that you need.
Yeah, that's a brilliant reframe. Thank you so much, Kate. And thanks for the whole conversation. It's been
You're very
just
welcome.
very, very deep and enlightening and fun.
Excellent. All in 1 hour. Amazing.
Thank you, Athena. We have just a couple minutes left, and I do want to honor time. I don't know, Kate, so Kay's question was, so congratulations to Kay. She just left her job to fulfill her dreams of growing a business. Good for you, Kay. How do you get people to start believing in what you want to deliver? Like, how do you start building that initial momentum? I think if I'm understanding her question right, if you could bottom line it, Kate, in this 30 seconds, anything you want to leave her with?
So I think having, again, it's sort of common startup entrepreneurship advice, but it matters even more for impact entrepreneurs, is having a really clear story, your elevator pitch of how you're describing what you're doing. Because what you'll find is the more people you tell that story to, and the more you go out and you tell it, and then the next time you tell it and you use a slightly different word, or you use a different phrase, or you put it in a different order, you'll every time you tell it, you'll refine it, it'll get better, but you'll also start to understand it and believe more yourself. So it's incredibly powerful. And there's something, when you start off, it can be incredibly nerve-wracking. It can feel incredibly nerve-wracking to tell other people what you're doing, because it's just an idea, or you don't really, there's so many unanswered questions. But the more you can talk about it externally, the more you are committing to it yourself. And when you do that, when you make that commitment to yourself and to the outside world, you will be amazed at what happens.
Beautiful. We are at the hour. I would love to just very quickly say thank you again so much, Kate, for your openness, your willingness to share, being here with us today. If anyone on camera wants to, again, give some snaps or some emoji of choice for Kate, yeah, this was a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much. If there's anything that we can do for Grow Up, if anything comes to mind, let me know, Kate, and I can figure out a way to share it with our community. Anything little or small, we would love to help get the word out.
Absolutely. Well, you can find, so the business is on social media. Yeah, the salad brand is unbelievable. And if any of you would like to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'd be very happy to say hi. So
thank you so much, Kate. Thank you everyone for being here. Have a great rest of your day or evening or wherever you happen to be. We appreciate you joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Kate. And thank you, Brittany, for bringing Kate into our community.
My pleasure.
Bye, everybody.
Kate.
Buddy, take care.